Welcome everyone. Today we uncover the story of one of the most mysterious and battle-hardened legions in Roman history, Legio IX, also known as Legio IX Hispana. Its exact origins remain a matter of debate, perhaps born in the final decades of the Roman Republic, possibly under Pompey, or another early commander. But what we do know is that by the time Julius Caesar rose to power, Legio IX was already a veteran force. And under his leadership, it became a key instrument in the conquest of Gaul and a crucial player in the brutal Roman Civil War. From the blood-soaked fields of Gaul to the battles that tore Rome apart, Legio IX earned its reputation not only through victories, but through unshakable discipline, fierce loyalty, and the fear it instilled in Rome's enemies. In this episode, we'll delve into its origins, follow its campaigns under Caesar, and uncover how this legion became a symbol of Roman power, a force of order amidst the chaos of conquest. So, prepare yourself for an adventure through time, into the heart of Roman warfare, strategy, and legacy. This is the story of Legio IX, forged in the fires of the late Republic, tested in Caesar's wars, and remembered by history. The origin of Legio IX is uncertain, but a ninth legion appears to have been raised by Gnaeus Pompeius Strabo during the Social War from 91 to 87 BC. In the year 90 BC, after suffering defeat at the Battle of Firmum and losing their commander Lafrenius, the remnants of the Italian rebel army fled to the city of Asculum, where they were promptly besieged by Strabo's forces. Gaius Julius, a native of Asculum and one of the leading rebel commanders, swiftly marched to relieve the city with 8 legions under his command. He sent word ahead instructing the inhabitants of Asculum to attack the Romans from within the walls as he approached, hoping to force the Romans into fighting on 2 fronts. However, the people of Asculum refused his command. Despite this, Julius succeeded in breaking through the Roman lines and temporarily entered the city. It was during this prolonged siege of Asculum that Legio IX likely made its first historical appearance. While ancient sources do not explicitly name the legion, it is widely believed by historians that Strabo's forces at Asculum included the newly raised 9th Legion. The city was heavily fortified and its population fiercely resisted Roman control. Strabo employed traditional Roman siege methods, constructing entrenchments, cutting off supplies, and building siege towers and engines. Although the specific role of Legio IX during the siege is not detailed in the surviving sources, it is reasonable to assume the legion played an important part in the investment and assault, given the scale of operations and the emerging loyalty of the unit to the Pompeian command structure. The siege lasted nearly a year, culminating in a decisive moment in 89 BC when Strabo engaged and defeated a rebel relief force attempting to break the blockade. According to Appian, this engagement was crucial to securing final Roman victory. While later sources sometimes claim the Italian relief army numbered as many as 60,000 men, these figures are likely exaggerated. Still, the fact that such a battle took place is well attested, and it is highly plausible that Legio IX participated actively in that engagement. Following the conclusion of the Social War, Legio IX was disbanded, and its veterans were settled in the region of Picenum. Around 65 BC, the 9th Legion was likely reconstituted by Pompey the Great during his military buildup. The legion first came under Julius Caesar's direct command in 61 BC, when he served as governor of Hispania Ulterior. Although the 9th may not yet have existed in its later permanent form, Caesar likely campaigned with troops who would go on to form its core. By 58 BC, when Caesar became governor of Cisalpine Gaul, he inherited 4 legions already stationed in the region, including the 9th, all veteran units that had probably served under Pompey or his lieutenants. While no surviving record confirms the legion's emblem, it is generally assumed that, like many of Caesar's most loyal units, the bull was its symbol, a common icon representing strength, loyalty, and martial endurance among the Caesarian legions. In 58 BC, at the Battle of the Arar, the first major engagement of the Gallic War, the 9th Legion took part under the command of Julius Caesar. Alongside the 7th, 8th, 10th, 11th, and 12th Legions, it attacked the migrating Helvetii tribe as they were in the midst of crossing the river Arar. Caesar's forces launched a surprise assault, catching a large portion of the Helvetii still in the process of crossing. After a short but brutal battle, the Roman legions were able to scatter and rout the tribesmen, inflicting heavy casualties and forcing the rest of the Helvetii to retreat further into Gaul. Following the victory at the river Arar, Caesar pursued the Helvetii deeper into Gaul. A few weeks later, the two forces met again at the Battle of Bibracte, near a hilltop settlement of the Aedui tribe. This time, the Helvetii had regrouped and were prepared for a major confrontation. Caesar deployed his army, including the 9th Legion, alongside the 7th, 8th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, in a traditional three-line Roman formation at the base of a hill. The Helvetii launched a fierce uphill assault, but the Roman legions held their ground. After prolonged fighting, Caesar ordered a counterattack, and the Roman lines advanced, pushing the Helvetii back with discipline and force. The 9th Legion, probably fighting on Caesar's left, played a crucial role in maintaining formation during the toughest phase of the engagement. Eventually, the enemy was broken and forced into a chaotic retreat. The victory at Bibracte effectively ended the Helvetii migration. In 57 BC, the Battle of the Sambre became one of the most intense and dangerous encounters of Caesar's Gallic campaigns. As the Roman legions, including the 9th, were making camp near the river Sambre, they were suddenly attacked by a large force of Belgic tribes, led by the Nervii, with support from the Atrebates and Viromandui. The ambush was swift and ferocious. The 9th and 10th legions, positioned on Caesar's left flank, were among the first to face the full force of the Belgic assault. Many Roman troops had not even had time to fully arm themselves when the enemy charge hit. Despite the confusion, the 9th and 10th held their ground under enormous pressure, buying Caesar the critical time needed to organize the rest of his forces. During the Battle of the Sambre in 57 BC, the 9th and 10th legions, under the command of General Labienus, found themselves temporarily separated from the rest of Caesar's army. The Atrebates tribe launched an uphill charge toward the Roman left flank, emerging suddenly from the river valley. Labienus remained calm and gave the order to unleash a volley of javelins. Exhausted and caught off guard, the Atrebates were thrown into confusion. Seizing the moment, Labienus ordered a full charge. The 9th and 10th legions descended the hillside in tight formation, crashing into the disorganized Belgic lines. The Roman assault quickly shattered the enemy ranks. The Atrebates fled in panic toward the Sambre River, with many being cut down or drowning as they tried to escape. Labienus pressed the advantage. His forces crossed the river and pursued the survivors into a wooded ridge where the Belgic tribes had hidden their encampment. After securing the camp, Labienus reached a high point and observed that Caesar's center and right, including the 7th and 12th legions, were under intense pressure from the Nervii. Recognizing the threat, Labienus immediately ordered the 10th Legion to recross the river and reinforce Caesar. Their rear assault broke the Nervi's resistance and turned the tide of battle. Once again, the discipline and aggression of the 9th and 10th Legions had played a decisive role in transforming a near disaster into a Roman victory. In 54 BC, the 9th Legion, along with the 7th, 8th, 10th, and 12th, took part in the invasion of Britain. Caesar landed successfully in Kent, despite opposition from British tribes under Cassivellaunus. After a series of skirmishes and political negotiations with rival British tribes, he led his army inland, including the Ninth, toward the Thames and into enemy territory. Although Caesar's commentary doesn't give individual battle roles for each legion, the Ninth was actively involved in marching, fort building, foraging missions, and at least one major engagement against Cassivellaunus's forces. In 52 BC, a large-scale Gallic revolt broke out under the leadership of Vercingetorix, a charismatic noble of the Arverni tribe. For the first time, a majority of the Gallic peoples united in coordinated resistance against Roman rule. In response, Julius Caesar mobilized his most experienced and loyal legions, including the Ninth, for a comprehensive campaign to crush the uprising. The decisive confrontation came at the Siege of Alesia, one of the most remarkable military operations of the ancient world. Although Caesar does not list individual legions by name, the Ninth Legion was almost certainly present, as it was part of his core veteran force throughout the campaign. When a massive Gallic relief force attempted to break the siege, the Roman legions, including the Ninth, were heavily engaged on both fronts, defending against sorties from within Alesia and assaults from outside. While Caesar does not assign specific sectors to each legion, it is clear that all veteran units were fully committed to holding the extensive lines of fortification under immense pressure. The eventual surrender of Vercingetorix marked the collapse of organized Gallic resistance. The outcome at Alesia not only secured Caesar's domination of Gaul, but also further reinforced the reputation of the Ninth Legion as a disciplined and battle-hardened unit, tested under extreme conditions. In 49 BC, as tensions between Julius Caesar and the Senate faction led by Pompey escalated, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his army, an open act of rebellion that marked the beginning of the Roman Civil War. Among the legions that followed him into this decisive conflict was the Ninth, a core veteran unit deeply loyal to Caesar. The Ninth Legion took part in the Battle of Ilerda in 49 BC, one of the key early engagements of Caesar's civil war. Unlike the major set-piece battles that followed, Ilerda was largely a campaign of maneuver and positional warfare, rather than direct large-scale combat. The Pompeian forces, under Afranius and Petreius, had concentrated their supplies at the city of Ilerda. Between Caesar's camp and the city stood a small but strategically important hill. Caesar aimed to seize and fortify this hill in order to divide the Pompeian position and cut off their supply line. Both sides sent detachments to secure the hill, but the Pompeians reached it first. Using flexible, skirmish-style tactics, they overwhelmed Caesar's forward troops, forcing them to retreat. Observing this setback, Caesar intervened directly. He personally led the Ninth Legion to reinforce the front and succeeded in pushing the Pompeians back toward the city. However, emboldened by this success, the Ninth pursued too far and found itself in a vulnerable position at the foot of the hill below Ilerda. The Pompeian forces, now holding the high ground, counterattacked with fresh troops. The narrow terrain prevented Roman cavalry and flanking units from providing support, leaving the Ninth isolated and exposed to continuous missile fire. Despite the difficult conditions and mounting pressure, the Legion held its position with discipline for nearly 5 hours. When their missiles were spent, the Ninth launched a bold uphill assault, broke through the enemy line with swords, and drove them once more toward the city walls. This action allowed the Legion to safely withdraw. Meanwhile, Roman cavalry gained the high ground and blocked further attacks on the retreating infantry. The encounter was intense and costly. Around 70 Roman soldiers were killed, over 600 wounded, and the Pompeians suffered similar losses, including several centurions. In early 48 BC, Julius Caesar laid siege to Dyrrhachium, where Pompey the Great had established a heavily fortified coastal stronghold. Seeking to force a decisive outcome, Caesar attempted to encircle Pompey by constructing an extensive network of fortifications, aiming to cut off his supplies and compel a surrender. Among the legions involved in this effort was the Ninth, one of Caesar's most experienced and trusted formations. As the siege wore on, Caesar's army began to suffer from severe food shortages and dwindling resources, while Pompey, supported by naval supply lines, remained well provisioned. The stalemate eventually broke when Pompey launched a concentrated assault on a vulnerable section of Caesar's outer defenses, specifically targeting the right flank, where the Ninth Legion was positioned. The initial Pompeian attack made significant gains. The Ninth was hard-pressed and nearly overwhelmed, but the position was stabilized when Mark Antony arrived with 12 cohorts, followed by Caesar himself, who brought additional reinforcements. Although the Ninth managed to hold its ground, Pompey capitalized on the moment by building a new camp in the area and securing supply lines further inland, effectively turning the tactical situation in his favor. Soon after, Caesar attempted to regain the initiative by launching an attack on a fortified position previously abandoned by his own forces and now reoccupied by Pompey. However, the assault was poorly coordinated and ended in failure. Caesar's troops were forced into a chaotic retreat, suffering the loss of around 960 soldiers and over 30 officers. This engagement marked Caesar's only major battlefield defeat during the Civil War, and the Ninth Legion was among the units most severely affected by the setbacks at Dyrrhachium. The Battle of Pharsalus, fought in August 48 BC, was the climactic showdown between Julius Caesar and Pompey the Great, and marked the decisive moment in the Roman Civil War. Following his setback at Dyrrhachium, Caesar regrouped quickly and pursued Pompey into central Greece. At Pharsalus, Caesar's smaller, battle-hardened army, consisting of approximately 22,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry, faced Pompey's significantly larger force of nearly 45,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry. Caesar deployed 8 legions in a traditional 3-line formation, with additional infantry reserves concealed behind the cavalry. The 9th Legion was placed on the left wing, while the 10th Legion held the right, where Caesar personally commanded. Despite heavy losses at Dyrrhachium weeks earlier, the 9th took its place once again among Caesar's core veterans. When it became clear that Pompey's army would not advance, Caesar's infantry, under the command of Mark Antony and Gnaeus Domitius Calvinus, initiated the assault. As the legions advanced, they paused just short of engagement range to rest and regroup, a tactical decision made instinctively by the soldiers rather than on direct command. Once reorganized, they resumed the advance and collided with Pompey's main infantry line. The center and right of Pompey's army held their ground as fierce, close-quarters fighting erupted. On Pompey's left flank, Titus Labienus commanded a large cavalry force and launched an attack against Caesar's smaller cavalry contingent. As anticipated, Caesar's cavalry began to give ground. However, Caesar had prepared a hidden 4th line of infantry behind his cavalry, men trained specifically to counter mounted attacks. At the critical moment, these troops surged forward and engaged the Pompeian cavalry at close range, using their pila as thrusting weapons rather than throwing them. The shock tactic caused confusion and panic among Pompey's cavalry, who quickly suffered heavy casualties and collapsed in disorder. Caesar's cavalry regrouped and launched a counterattack, driving the fleeing enemy horsemen from the field. With the Pompeian cavalry routed, Caesar's cavalry wheeled around and struck Pompey's left flank, now exposed and unsupported. At this moment, Caesar ordered his 3rd line, composed of his most seasoned veterans, to press the attack. The assault shattered Pompey's flank and caused his infantry to break and flee. Meanwhile, the Ninth Legion, positioned on Caesar's left wing, held firm and maintained steady pressure during the envelopment. Though less involved in the dramatic cavalry engagement, the Ninth's role was crucial in sustaining the integrity of Caesar's line and contributing to the overall collapse of the Pompeian forces. The battle ended in a decisive Caesarian victory. Pompey fled the field, and with him, the hopes of the Republican faction. The performance of Caesar's core legions, including the Ninth, proved vital in securing control over the Roman world. Following his decisive victory at Pharsalus, Julius Caesar turned his attention to North Africa, where the remnants of the Pompeian faction, led by Metellus Scipio, Cato the Younger, and King Juba I of Numidia, had gathered to mount a final resistance. In late 47 BC, Caesar landed his forces on the African coast in preparation for a climactic confrontation, which would culminate in the Battle of Thapsus. Among the legions accompanying him was the 9th Legion, a battle-hardened unit with a distinguished record from the Gallic Wars and the earlier phases of the Civil War. However, upon their arrival, internal tensions surfaced. According to the accounts of Suetonius and Cassius Dio, the 9th briefly mutinied, demanding immediate discharge and compensation for their prolonged service. Caesar responded with characteristic authority. He drew his sword and threatened to decimate the legion unless discipline was immediately restored. The soldiers quickly relented, reaffirmed their loyalty, and expressed their willingness to continue in service. The episode highlighted both the strain of extended campaigning and Caesar's unmatched command over his troops. Despite this incident, the 9th Legion remained active and is believed to have taken part in the Battle of Thapsus in early 46 BC. While Caesar does not list individual legions in his narrative of the battle, contemporary historians agree that all available legions, including the 9th, were committed to the field. Caesar's army, supported by local African allies and composed of well-trained and disciplined infantry, launched a coordinated assault on the Pompeian position. Although Scipio's forces deployed war elephants in an attempt to disrupt the Roman line, Caesar's legions, prepared for this threat, held their ground. The elephants were repelled by concentrated missile volleys, ultimately turning back into their own lines and contributing to the Pompeian collapse. The Roman advance continued with precision and aggression. The result was a comprehensive victory for Caesar. Scipio's army was routed, and the last major center of resistance in Africa was extinguished. For the 9th Legion, the campaign marked both a moment of internal crisis and a reaffirmation of their place among Caesar's most reliable veterans. Following Caesar's final victory in the Civil War, the 9th Legion was disbanded, and many of its veterans were settled in the region of Picenum in central Italy. Yet the legion's story did not end there. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, his ally Ventidius Bassus attempted to reconstitute the 7th, 8th, and 9th legions to support the Caesarian cause. However, as historian Lawrence Kepi notes, it is not clear that any of these survived even to the time of Philippi. Still, the legacy of the 9th endured. In the turbulent years that followed, Octavian, Caesar's heir, would recall the veterans of the 9th to take part in his campaign against Sextus Pompeius in Sicily. But that is another chapter in the legion's long and complex history, one we will explore at a later date.